Good afternoon. We're going to start welcoming you to Gov School this afternoon. We'll get started here at 4 o'clock. This session, we'll be talking about the RFP. We'll get started here in just a minute. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you here this afternoon to Gov School. This is a service of govdirections.com. We enjoy providing some additional services to help you find and win government contracts. And we learned early on that if we spend a little time teaching and helping you understand the basics of government contracting, then you're going to win more business. So our Gov School session, we have throughout the week. You can always go to govschool.com, link directly from your account and your member homepage, and you can see our schedule online. And we have with us the various speakers, and I have Cynthia here with me today as well. She's one of our speakers in a class where she talks about how to actually do your capability statement. Others we may call her to speak in a little bit, but today we're going to focus on the request for proposal. I actually enjoy doing this session. This is one that is built around understanding how the request for proposal was drafted, kind of give you some pointers of what you really need to look for in when you've got to respond to them. And I want to make this as interactive as possible. We are live on YouTube, not able to take any questions on YouTube, but those of you who are in our classroom on Zoom today can type into the chat box, but just remember that we are recording this so that you can maintain your privacy as you see fit there. My name, once again, is Mark Knowles, and I'm one of the founders. And I've been working in this sector for just over 30 years, and we've won about just over 350 contracts in 34 different states, and have worked primarily in the consulting human resources area. So I'm going to lean on some of that knowledge as we go forward today, but focusing really on what I always try to look for when I go to when I first pick up an RFP. And I'm going to show you a slideshow, and then we're going to go to some real live activities to see how we go about pulling some actual RFPs. And if you want to tell me a little bit about your business, you can drop that into the chat box, and I'll try to build some of my comments based around who you are and what you do. Just in general, what we're going to try to accomplish today is I'm going to identify the structure of a request for proposal. I'm going to walk through each section, and then I'm going to try to explain its importance. I'm going to show you how some of them will deviate from what's more traditional, but just knowing that most procurement officers work really the same way. So when you pick up one, you've seen the structure of all of them. But always pay attention to the ones that you're working with at that time. A lot of times they will ask you to respond back in just a little bit different manner, and you don't want to just because you get comfortable doing it the same way over and over again. When that one person does it a little different, you want to make sure you accommodate their own process that they use. I'm going to use an actual RFP as an example to identify each section. When we pull that, we'll see how it actually corresponds with what I've told you in the class here. This is a traditional classroom setting. If you need to step up, walk away, feel free to do that. It is recorded, so you can come back and watch it a little bit later. It's directly on our YouTube. I'll show you how to get to that in just a few minutes, but you can subscribe to our free YouTube channel on YouTube, just under @GovDirections. One thing I wanted just to caution you with, this is a favorite statement, comment of mine from Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own. I don't know if you watched it. It's the softball movie. And, we all can get out there and play a softball game. We know how to play softball generally, but it's actually hard. And if it were easy, everyone would just go out there and become professionals. And that's something he told the group of women who are becoming professional softball players. And just as a reminder, when you start getting involved with something, it's really supposed to be hard if you're going to be good at it. And so practice, and you'll find your groove in government contracting. When we enter into government contracting, we've got to remember that while the most common form of request is the request for proposal, there are other instruments that are used to acquire your services. And I also like to point out that in the United States, we're somewhat different. We really like to actively engage the private sector, governments do, in order to provide services and supplies. It is a long-standing tradition. Governments typically try not to do it themselves if there is a private marketplace. And so be familiar with it. Oftentimes, the very first thing they have to do is determine if there is a marketplace, and they'll use a request for information to do that. Request for information sometimes is very informal, sometimes somewhat specific, maybe oftentimes looking for qualifications where they're requesting that you come to the table and tell them about your individual, the different types of engineering you might be involved in, or legal and so forth, and all the way to the more common, so just source of salt. So here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to buy some paper towels or maybe some cleaning supplies, and we want to know everybody who's interested in providing these services to us, so more of a source of salt. Oftentimes, the request for information is very generic in the sense that I know that I need maybe a new cloud system for my office, but I'm not quite sure, how to go about doing that. But you're the subject matter expert. We're trying to find you. Please come to help us and tell us what we need to do. So very, very informal. You give them your credentials, having that capability statement ready to go. We did a session on that just this week. But having that capability statement ready to go, and it speaks to your skill set, is very important with these first three instruments that are widely used. And in fact, almost most contracts that are new always go out first with somewhat of a request for information or a source of salt notification. Let everybody know it's coming. Okay, so be prepared. Do not ignore them, but be prepared to respond back to them. Sometimes they're really informal in an emergency disaster, for example. We saw this in the initial stages of COVID, and we also see it right after maybe a tornado outbreak. We saw it in Kentucky. We see them in hurricane-prone areas, floods, fire. When there's an immediate need for a service or supply, the governments will put up maybe a web page, and they'll just say, anybody who's able to provide us a service or supply, tell us about your company. And tell us what you're able to do and how quickly you can do it. Tell us where you're located at, but very, very basic. And they want you to be able to send them that capability statement or send them some response, and then they will call on you. Just pick up the phone and call you directly. They oftentimes are able to work with rules that are in place, but be able to acquire your services in a quick manner. So know that. But whenever in a more traditional environment, in a competitive environment, anytime you actually see an invitation to quote, an invitation to bid, or a request for proposal, that is a competitive environment. Okay, there are rules in place that allow them to go in and do a sole source or an emergency acquisition. And if they're going to do that, a government's going to do that, then they've got ways to do that. So know that when you do see a request for proposal, or request for a bid, or a request for a quote, they're wanting a competitive response. So it's not a done deal. That's the first time. A lot of times I hear, isn't it a done deal, Mark? I'm looking at this RFP and it looks like it's been written by my competitor. They probably got the business. It's just not the case. Once they're in the marketplace, they're looking for individuals to respond. And so you have a good shot at winning that. So it's important that you understand how to read those. Just in general, if invitation to quote, There is a more formal document, or just to pick up a call, a phone, and call you and say, here's what we're going to do. Maybe we're going to hire somebody to come in and give a pest control for our building. It's 1,000 square feet. And we're going to ask 3 pest control providers to respond. And when they call you, you got to be ready to go. But you should understand what they're looking for right away. It should be something that's so common that you're going to know what it is. It's going to be a spec, maybe a brand name of some sort, and you're going to give them a response really on the spot. Not a lot of detail, not a lot of work to it, but when they ask, everybody knows what they're talking about. So that's the invitation to quote. An invitation to bid, more specific. They'll give you all the specifications of it, but you could potentially have another type or another something that's slightly different or equal but different. Maybe not a name brand of some sort. But the government knows exactly what they want, and it could be a service, a supply, but they know exactly, and they've laid it out for you. Whenever they get a quote back, everybody's going to give them a bid response, and then they're going to hire somebody based on some formula of low bid or best value or something. But everybody's on a level playing field. They don't have to really negotiate or go in there and evaluate the significant different types of responses have been given back. So somewhat specific. And then the request for proposal, the government, they know what they want to accomplish. They know what they're trying to acquire. But you're the expert, and they want to hear from you. They want you to propose back to them a methodology or a particular type of product to accomplish what they're seeking to do. Okay, so it's a little different document. They're looking for your input, and you got to be ready to go and respond to them in your industry sector. You generally will either be in an invitation to bid marketplace or a request for proposal marketplace. So you'll get comfortable with those types of responses back, but knowing that they want your input, you're the expert when they're talking about a request for proposal. The invitation to bid, it's laid out pretty clear, and they won't give you a time to respond back to them, 30 days typically, but everybody's going to give them a best price, and most likely they're going to go with that meets the quality that they're asking for at the price that they're seeking. So that's the types of instruments that you would be faced with or be looking at when you're working with governments. There's some others that are out there, but these are the most common. Okay, and I would point out that there's oftentimes a combination too. So it could be a request for qualifications and a request for proposal. So they want everybody to get in who's qualified, and then they're going to issue the RFP, and individuals will respond back who are qualified. They're going to go ahead and pre-qualify everybody. Same thing with the invitation to bid, could be done the same way. Or there could be a combination of an invitation to bid and a request for proposal. So they're going to say, we know we want this exactly, we want prices on this, but we're also thinking about doing these other parts, and we want you to tell us what you think about that as well. Okay, so it could be a combination. And as much as we'd like everybody to kind of just lay it out and have it all lined up and everything in the right order, oftentimes governments use terminology back and forth. Okay, but you're going to be knowledgeable when you step in and you actually are doing this, but sometimes even more so than the government official who's also somewhat new. They're looking for your help as well. Okay, so give them a little slack occasionally. So just in what is a request for proposal? Well, it is a solicitation. That means they want you to respond. Often made through a bidding process where they're giving you a timeline and everybody's responding, and they're making a best value decision to acquire any sort of valuable asset, service, potential suppliers based on your proposal. Okay, and you're going to be proposing back to them. So that's the formal definition of that. When you look at one, it's generally going to include all of these parts here. Okay, these are the typical parts. Could be more, but at least these here. Okay, they're going to give you a statement of work. This is what they're seeking to accomplish. Clarity is important. When I actually teach how to write RFPs at a graduate level for future procurement officers or future managers, the first thing I teach them is accuracy, brevity, clarity. Be accurate in what you're asking for. Okay, make sure it's brief so that you're not using unnecessary words. I'm always a stickler with that. My kids write a paper or something, I'll look at it and say, I'll send it back to them and say, now take out half the words, because most of the time we're putting in all these words we don't need. Okay, so that's be clear, always be clear. Okay, and then brevity, be brief. Okay, clarity, brevity, accuracy. And so when you pick up that statement of work, if they took my class, it shouldn't be more than maybe 3 sentences. Okay, that's it. They need to be able to tell you what they want in 3 or 4 sentences. And then they're going to lay out the technical specifications. Okay, they're going to. This could be document. I mean, I think I've seen one as many as 1,000 pages one time. I mean, they're very specific in what they're looking for, and so you have to be aware of that going into it. Sometimes it's not so. They'll just say just generically, here's a spec, but we're going to look for you to give us some responses back. But they'll tell you what they're looking to accomplish within that statement of work in a separate section there. And then they're going to give you a schedule. What do they want you to work with? What kind of timeline they're looking for you to respond back? Oftentimes, this is going to be a schedule how they're going to pay you. So pay attention to this. And then there's going to be a list of deliverables. And those lists of deliverables also will be most likely timed to some sort of compensation of some sort. So that, in the work that I do in consulting, I usually take a payment up front, and then I take a payment sometimes in the middle, and then a payment when I deliver a final product. That's oftentimes going to drive how I'm going to price them. So, for example, if they don't want me to give, if they want me to give them a proposal and they're not going to pay me to the very end, then I'm going to charge them higher. Okay, so that I normally would. So that's going to be a part of the compensation discussion that we would have with someone. So watching for those deliverables and what type of workload I have to do and when it has to be done is very important. Contract terms and conditions. These are almost always driven by the state that you're located in. Okay, you can see the same sort of legal requirements in place. Only know that whenever you're dealing with a government, if there's a contract in there, you got to live with that contract. Okay, it's very rare you're going to get it changed. So I always point that out. So don't come in thinking I'm going to be able to negotiate a contract. That usually has been through, the legal staff of a government. And to get it changed in time to win a contract it's not going to happen. So make sure you can be aware of that. And this is important because oftentimes they'll spell out things such as insurance requirements, confidentiality, indemnity. These are things that can impact your pricing, and you need to be aware of that in the contract term because they're not going to change that at all. So make sure you read through those. And if they should not include that in RFP, I always include it as an attachment, my own contract, in return when I send something back to them. Even if they don't ask for it, I'll just put in there and say, by the way, there's also a contract here. And then you're sort of laying the groundwork on that discussion because you're always going to eventually go to contract. But the contract itself is important for compliance purposes, and it's going to outline how you're going to be judged at the end of the day. Okay, so be fully aware of that going into that. The conditions themselves, you'll see that like for example, in Georgia, there's going to be specific affidavits that we have to send back. That's going to be a part of that contract that I'm going to agree to do that. There might be some insurance requirements or some subcontracting requirements. These are things that you would find very common that if it's in Georgia, and I've been in Georgia, I know I should expect it to be there. Have my documents ready to go. I'm going to start talking about using a Google folder. So you have everything in that Google folder. You don't have to go look for it. Okay. Because every state's going to be, once you do one there, the next state you go to, it might be a little bit different. Keep one in there for South Carolina. I'm going to have those documents ready to go. I'm not going to be fumbling around. It saves you on time. They're also going to give you a format of the proposal. This is very important because what they're trying to do at this point is because you're in a request for proposal environment, and everybody's going to be different. Okay. You're going to have they're looking for you as a subject matter expert. Now, but they want to be able to judge you, okay? And they want to judge you fairly and evaluate you fairly. So they're going to say, send the information back to us in this way. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, put it in less than 50 pages, and make sure you sign every page at the bottom. And so they're looking at that point to make sure when they see your proposal, they can line it up against somebody else and another party, and then they can evaluate you in a fair way. And most likely they're going to have some sort of evaluation criteria that I will talk about in just a second, or maybe a team, and then they're going to pass along those documents. So if they say we want the format, we want 10 PDFs plus we want 10 zip drives or whatever, you got to be aware of that. So pay particular attention to that. Qualification and experience. This is almost always required this is your credentials. This is not your capability statement at this point. Capability statement has got you in the door with a request for information, but it may contain some of the same pieces of information. Okay, and so you'll have that maybe dropped into a format where more in a paragraph or two, or maybe if you've got some specific knowledge skills that you have to make sure you're aware of, make sure that the government's aware of, then you make sure you explain that out. You're not going to use any acronyms. You're going to be, you're going to lay out the information they're looking for, and they'll tell you what that is exactly. And if they say they need 3 years, they need 3 years. Now, I differ sometimes with this particular section. Sometimes they'll give you, it's kind of like when I go in to potentially try to hire somebody, I want to hire the most qualified person. I want to hire somebody that's got more knowledge than me, okay? And when I go out there and I actually look, I might not be able to find that sometimes. And so it doesn't mean I'm not going to hire them. It just means that maybe they're not going to be at the same level that I'm seeking. So if I go in there and I say we want 5 years, and no one sends back 5 years, I'm still going to potentially take your contract or take your RFP and give you the win. But I'm just going to lay out what I'm expecting in that qualification experience package. So I'd tell you that, simply say that if you see something that maybe you're brand new or you're new to government contracting, this is double negative. I'm not going to skip over an RFP simply because I don't meet up with their same qualification experience. I'm going to try to sell myself a little better in other parts. Okay. But I'm not going to make up things, and I'm not going to skip over things. I'm just going to be straight up with them about that. Okay. I'm going to say, I don't have this, but I've got some, I've been doing this other, and it's kind of the same. Okay. Sell yourself. Cost breakdown. Here, they're going to tell you how they want your cost breakdown. Oftentimes, they don't even want to see your costs in an RFP. They want to hold that. Okay, they're evaluating most likely your qualification experience, your ability to meet technical specs. They're looking to make sure you can meet the statement of work. And then secondary, they want cost breakdown. They may want to put it into a separate sealed proposal, a separate sealed document, or some sort, or they want you to put it in there and they'll lay it out. And they may want to turn that into a unit number or an hourly number or a fixed fee. And the reason why they're laying out the cost breakdown is they want to be able to, once again, evaluate you comparatively speaking to other parties. Okay. And so they want everybody to come to the table with the same understanding. This oftentimes is spelled out a little bit more in the question and answer period. And you can also make sure you go in and you see this actually in the RFP. Once you become really interested in a project for a government, go back and try to find the budget for that, because governments don't make decisions in the dark. They're talking about it in some public meeting. There's some discussion that's occurred. You can find that if you oftentimes just by Googling the organization's name, maybe some of the comments that's been made in the statement of work, and you can find it somewhere in their minutes or their agendas, and the budget dollar numbers right there. So I'll just kind of give you that pointer, but they'll tell you how they want you to respond back. And then the most important part, okay, beyond all the other parts, but this one here, evaluation criteria. Know how you're going to be evaluated. I know when I teach class in graduate school, the first thing I hear from the students is not really what am I going to learn in here, professor? It's not what they ask me. Is how are you going to get what do I have to do to get an A? Okay, and they always want that rubric. It's so important. I always step back and say, everybody's getting an A. Okay, focus in on everything else. Okay, so it's that then they have to work toward that. But evaluation criteria here is so important. You got to know where they're putting the focus. And when you're dealing with an RFP, I would bet on average the cost is always less than 10%. Okay, the qualification experience is going to be by far the weight. They're also going to look at your ability to deliver. And their ability to meet contract terms, things of this nature, somewhat generic in their approach and judgmental. And there is no school of evaluation. So, have your friends evaluate your proposal. They'll score it basically about the same as you would find in a setting of a class, a round table of 8 people who they've chosen randomly in the government itself. See? So go ahead and get somebody else and take a look. And so this is going to be where it's at, but pay attention to what you have to focus in on, and always be aware of the weight. Okay, so these are the typical parts. You're also going to have some addendums and some requirements that you're going to never want to skip over. If you can't do something, always be straight up about it. Okay, and let them know that. Don't ever, if 1 or 2 things knock you out and say you can't really do it, don't skip. Still consider submitting it. No one's going to get everything back to them exactly the same. So don't let that scare you off. It's supposed to be hard, and just remember that going into it. Okay. And so this is the key thing. Always is this cold play. You're the one that I wanted to find. Okay. Finding the right RFP is so important whenever you're trying to win government business. You don't want to just go out there throw darts. Okay. It's not the way to do something. You got to be precise. I call it developing indicators of success. Okay. If I start bidding on these type contracts, if I bid personally on government human resource contracts looking for classification and compensation studies that are in the population range of say 5,000 to 12,000, 15,000, and they have on average about 200 employees, I'm going to have a 60 to 70% shot at winning that contract. If I bid on governments the size of Atlanta, I'm going to have a 0% shot. I'm going to defeat myself before I ever start. Okay. And so don't do that. Start. You'll see the perfect opportunities looking at you in the face. And then you're going to start measuring how successful you are responding to them. And then you start targeting those. There are 5,000 calls for bids and proposals every single day. You're going to be overwhelmed. Okay. I could really just there's right now, if I showed you all the class and comp studies that are available, there's probably 30 of them. Maybe about 3 of them I actually have a real shot at winning. Okay, I'm going to let the other 27 go. That's too frustrating. It's not my wheelhouse. So always know what you're looking for, and when you see it, you'll know it is the one that you wanted to find. Okay, and then as we get into the actual documents here, I always pull back Parkinson's law. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Okay, if you got 2 days to respond, you'll make it. Okay, get yourself ready to go. If you got 2 weeks to respond, it's going to take you 2 weeks. Okay, just know that going into it. Don't set unreasonable expectations. Have your documents ready to go, and you'll find you'll have success in filling out the forms and so forth. They won't be too well. Also, if they give you 2 weeks, take 2 weeks. Okay, don't send it off early. There could be an amendment, and I'm using 2 weeks, but most of these are 45 days, 30 to 45 days. Don't see the RFP and send it back the first week. Okay, wait until day 30 for the 45 one, or day 24 for the 30-day one. Okay, send it back, because the last thing they're going to do, they're going to issue an addendum saying, hey, did you see all the other addendums that we sent? And we want you to sign off that. You don't want to be thrown out because you didn't send off the last one. You don't want to be scrambling at the last minute to amend it, and you want to get it to them on a timely basis. Okay. So as we go into that, I'm going to give you some just quick helpful tips before I move over to the web. But we want to always read an entire proposal first. Okay, pull it out, print it out. Sometimes it's more important print. Some of us could do it online, easy these days. But make sure you see the entire proposal. If you capture just the RFP and you don't go back and look at some of the other forms, and you may miss something. The addendums, they could have some major changes to things. So you want to make sure you read the entire document, okay? And make sure you've done that. Pay attention to the areas that we have discussed here. Whenever you do that, you set it aside after you first start it. Don't respond right away. And think about things, talk to colleagues, make sure you're a good fit, and then you can complete the proposal. Okay, so we're going to try to do that right now. So if I hit escape here, I think it's let me go back to screen, make sure I'm doing this. I'm using, there it goes. I'm using the Google document drive for the first time. So here we go. So if we were to go and Gov Directions in your daily alert, and you should have it by this time, have set up some parameters to help you with your indicators of success. I mean, you're looking at your categories first, just the basic levels. The states that you're willing to work into. If you haven't done that in the member home account, you're going to make sure you do that. Okay, go in, set those account settings, and then that's going to drive your daily alert. A daily alert is always going to tell you those bids that match, or those RFPs that match you from the previous 24-hour period. Okay, if you go in here, view all bids by your preferences, that's going to show you everything that you needed to see that's been added since midnight. Okay, and then there's going to be a drop-down screen for a period over time. So if I was going in, and I'm just going to use a couple here very quickly as I do this, my industry preferences, I would go in potentially, and I'm going to look today at equity and inclusion. I looked at it earlier, so I want to make sure I've got that checked as my types of bids that I'm looking for. Okay, and if I could cast a wide net, I have to have at least one category. of documents. I'm only going to see those bids that are within that category. They're crosswalked by NAICS code, by NIGP commodity code, and also a reviewer on our staff. Okay, I'm going to set those settings, and then I might go in and actually do a setup where I might do a location. If I want to limit myself, I can. But right now I can do business throughout the United States. I can do business in Ireland if I want to, but because everything's remote, everything's Zoom, so I'm going to take advantage of that right now. So I'm going to leave that blank, but I can go in there and limit myself if I want to. Once they're set, then I want to go in and I'm going to actually go in and do a view all bids by my preferences when I first come to this. Now tomorrow, all those new RFPs will come to me, and it's going to drive those in there. So I actually saw one here that's been added. Okay, but if I wanted to drop down over time, this has been added since midnight, not due to March 30th, so I got some time. And I could drop down to the last 28 days and so forth. In addition, this blue bar, this is going to be a toggle bar. So I can organize these. If I had multiple industries or had multiple states I'm working with, I could sort and use that in different ways. Sometimes I want to do this on a due date simply because some of these could be issued today and got a 5-day turnaround. I want to start on those first. Okay, but I'm gonna get that Google Drive ready with the documents that I need. But this one caught my attention today, and this is the Racial Equity Action Plan in the city of Decatur, Georgia. So here we are in Georgia. It fits, well, that's another criteria. I want to work close to home. And in fact, this is my hometown, so this is where I'm at. This is and then I've got a title here. I'm going to capture this right away so I don't lose it. Okay, it's going to go in my personal capture folder. Instead of needing that to save there for maybe I have a team of individuals who are working with me. And I want to make sure that they have that document. It's there. There it is right there. If I want to remove it, maybe this one here, I thought I was interested, but it turns out I'm not really a variable frequency drive replacement guy. So I want to remove that, keep my clean. Okay. And not only that, but this one here, I was interested. They come out with this routinely, and I want to maybe market. I might not want to bid on this one since I didn't win it, but I want to market to them in the future. So I'm going to keep it there. Maybe in May, I'm going to send them my capability statement. There's reasons why you want to keep information in your capture folder so it can remind you. Okay. In that bid, that RFP, go back to it. It's always going to show that I have captured, turns out to gold. If there was a NAICS code that was assigned to this, it would tell us right here. There's not in this one because it's a local government listing. Local governments don't really use NAICS codes. That's the North American Industry Classification System. That's basically used at the federal level only. Okay. Local governments traditionally use the National Institute for Governmental Purchasing, NIGP commodity codes. Now, in this case here, there's no codes assigned to it. There's been a summary here, synopsis. If there was a specific note we needed to tell you about this RFP, we would tell you that in the competitive intelligence, something we think you should know about it. It's a way that maybe it's awkward to get to or something like that. Also, if you're not familiar with the Decatur, you might want to look. But now, like I said, everything's going to be there it is, downtown Decatur. It's a nice town. It's one of the top places to live in America. So there's a lot of things that's intriguing to me. It's the right size government, potentially. I know this, but I may want to do some research. I may actually want to go in there and read some agenda meetings. But right now, I want to go in. It's due March 30th. I've got the bid number. I know that Renee is the person to call if I got or email if I got a question. I'm only going to deal with that one individual. Okay, knowing that going into it. I'm going to open that up, take a look at it. This is going to be their website where the details and contact information. They're always going to give us a summary. They're going to have a Zoom meeting on Thursday, pre-bid meeting on March 17th. I'm going to make sure I attend that. This is mandatory, so I have to. And you know what I do sometimes? Just as a trick, if you're new, you might want to go to this and say, I'm actually in Atlanta. And not only that, and I've got a small business. I've got a local small business enterprise certification for this county they're located in. So it's an advantage for a big corporation who might be thinking about bidding on this. So when I go, I'm going to say, I'm not bidding on it just by myself. I'm looking to work with one of you. Here's my capabilities statement. I'm going to drop that into that pre-bid meeting on Zoom, just like right here. If I went in, I would go in and maybe go to my computer. I'm going to have that ready to go. And let's just see here. I've got that capabilities statement. There we go. And I'm going to have that available, ready to go. Not only that, when I'm in a Zoom room or getting ready to talk about RFPs, I'm going to make sure it's professional. Okay. You should see on my name right now, Mark Knowles. Okay. Not Mr. Big Guy. Not, I want to go drink brew at 4 o'clock. Something, they want professional stuff. Okay. Make sure it has your name and brand your company. Okay. You can do that with your Zoom setup. Make sure it's set up right. So when you log into this meeting, you're ready to go. Okay, that sends a very strong signal. But you can see that the capability statement, and then I have my supporting documents. I'm going to open that up. This is going to be the RFP. Okay, so here we are at the RFP. I got there within a click, 2 clicks. This one here, they released it. Actually, looks like they released it today. Today's the 17th. So we're doing a pretty good job. Okay, you got directions. We're fine and quick. It's placed here. It's not due back till March 30th. Okay. Renee's the contact. They're always going to do. This is what's referred to as the cover sheet. Anything you really need to know is generally in the cover sheet. Okay. And who you need to contact, what you need to do, where they're located, always on the cover. Okay. Pay attention to that. If Renee is there, don't be calling the city manager. Don't be calling the mayor and say, oh, I saw this RFP. Don't reach out to anybody else. They're more or less in a cone of silence. Okay. You're to deal with Renee. That's it. Okay. If you do that, you're going to be, if they don't specifically cross you off, you're pretty much crossed off. Okay. Just so you know that they're not going to mess around with that, because that's going to make somebody look bad. Even though that's an opposite the way most business owners operate. If I want to do business with you as an individual, I'm going to be aggressive and try to contact you, do whatever I need to. But in government, you can't do that. You got to do exactly, you got to work in their environment. You got to do it exactly the same way they've asked you. Okay, they give us an introduction, what I call more the scope of work. Here they're laying out, they're giving you some information. Pay attention to that. Okay, they're telling you what's happened, what led them to this, the strategic plan. Not only that, they're giving you some information that you can then go out and Google. Okay, and maybe you can find it. You're probably going to find it on their website. You can go in there, here's their website, and then you can go in, you can do a search, and maybe what was that racial equity plan, and it should come up. Okay, and learn more about that. Okay, and so there it is. That's RFP. This is some things that led to them, comments that people have made. It's all recorded for you. Don't you wish we had something like this when you're dealing with another business? Because you don't really. With government, it is all laid out. Okay, you just got to go get it. Okay, you got to go find it, and that's so important. And I can't stress that enough. Anytime I'm thinking about bidding on it, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go. They're going to tell me that what committee is going to evaluate this. I'm going to learn very quickly who's on that committee. I'm going to go back and read the agendas and meetings. And the first thing I look for is this contentious? Is this something I don't want to be involved with? Because that's important too. You want to make sure you're in a successful environment. Okay. Sometimes we want to take on a challenge. Other times it's just not. If it's a vote of 3-2 or 5-4, and people are fighting and it's divisive, you don't want to mess with that. Or if I am messing with it, I'm going to jack up the price. Okay, because they're going to pay me for that trouble. So these are kind of strategic decisions that you're making. And what they were looking for there, they're going to give you some details about the Zoom meeting. They probably got a disclosure here, like, if this happens sometimes in Zoom, we'll have a way to fix that and so forth. But you're going to read those details there. And then they're going to give you some information about their organization and why they're doing this, background, giving you background information. Before, looks like they added a lot of that, 2 or 3 pages. But then we get to that scope of work. It's important. It's when you start talking about pricing. They've laid out the framework. It seems like, to me, that's a very organized city. They know what they're doing. Okay, they've laid it out. So they're giving you some indications that this is going to be a place you want to work with them. They're going to be on top of things. Okay, and that doesn't matter if it's on this topic or another topic. Okay, it's any topic. If it's laid out in a way that you can understand it, they're helping you understand it. That's going to be somebody you want to work with. Okay, so they're going into that, that. But 5 items they want to do here. There's just a scope. Now, I'm not going to read all the details of the scope, but I'm not going to go in there and assume they want 7, 8, 9, 10 items. Okay, well, they told me as they want 5. This is the scope. It's 5 parts. Okay, don't add to a government. This is another thing. Whenever you're in the private sector, you usually are taught to be creative. You're an entrepreneur. When you're dealing with government, never be creative. Okay, you give them exactly what they're asking for. If there's something here that's not clear, you can ask a question, but you're just opening up a can of worms. Okay, you need to do exactly what they tell you. Then they can make an adjustment to it if they need to. Wait for somebody else to ask the question during the sessions. You don't want to be the one opening it up, because then they could potentially delay it. They could have all kind of reasons. Those kind of questions you can almost always get answered once they hire you. Okay. Remember that going into it. So always leave, even in your proposals, you're going to have that ability to make any adjustments if you need to, based on clarity of purpose. Okay. They also will give you the deliverables. This is what they want you to do. There's 4 items. And then they're most likely going to time that somehow or another. If they don't time it, you should probably time it back to them, okay? And say, here's what I'm going to do. Deliverable number 1 within 2 months. Deliverable number 2, so forth, okay? And have that you collar yourself and how you actually price it, so that you're not going to be caught and they expect you to work for 3 years when you were only thought where you were going to work with them for 3 months. Okay, so know that going into it and try to understand some of that parts of it. But the deliverables there, this is all they're asking for. Maybe you think there's a better way of doing it. That doesn't come up until you get into the door. Okay, make sure you understand that. Long-term management and accountability. Okay, they want a long-term strategy. They're giving you that. That's a separate deliverable, basically, but still a deliverable. And they're adding some other features. This community is concerned about accessibility. They want to make sure whatever you do is also accessible. So these are the sort of the terms and conditions, not specifically laid out in the contract, but going to that point where this is the things you're going to see in that final contract. Okay, so they're telling you that going into it, how they're going to select you. Okay, right away. So here it is. They want you to know your expertise of your staff. They want your work plan. They want your availability. They want to know your engagement strategy. They want to know you're a diversified firm. That's their criteria for selecting you. Where's the money at on this? See, that's not an invitation to bid. The number one thing they're looking for is what's your price? Okay, I've already told you what I want. Here, they want you to sell yourself. So you need to have your stacks. Go ahead and write it out, because if you do this here, you're going to have to do it for another RFP. So always have that ready to go. Expertise, your methodology, or your work plan. What's your traditional schedule? How soon can you be available? Know if you've got like 10 RFPs going out at the same time, all 10 of them can hire you. So be prepared that you can have availability for that. And if you can't, then you need to say that going into it. Okay. The last thing you ever want to do in RFP is to embarrass yourself or not be able to fulfill a responsibility, because that will just stick with you forever. You can't shake it. Okay. So you've got to be able to do it. And have these items. So if you're in this business, this is the first time I've looked at a RFP for racial equity action plan. I can guarantee if I pick up another one, it's going to have the same criteria in terms of selection, almost always. And it's a couple of reasons. One is they don't reinvent these things; they're borrowing from each other. Okay. Second is it's almost built around your industry, the things that you would normally expect. So you should have whatever it is in your industry ready to go. Okay, be ready to be there. Fee proposal spoke to here. They want it in a separate sealed envelope. They're not even going to consider it until they consider these other items. Okay. Once they've narrowed you down, then they're going to get you in. And I imagine somewhere you're going to be able to negotiate. It'll say it in the document somewhere. This is what we're expecting, but when we get in here, we'll be willing to talk to you based on our final selection. But I've almost never been in a situation where I wasn't able to negotiate my price one way or another. Okay, this is sort of the ballpark based on what they're expecting. But be ready to answer that. I was always taught never be afraid to ask for money. Okay, always, this is what I'm worth. This is what you need to pay me. Okay, be prepared because they're going to ask you that question. So know the answer to that question when you go in. Okay, don't ever undersell yourself with government. It doesn't pay off. Okay, you may have to go in somewhat competitive when you're first introduced into the marketplace, but don't ever undersell yourself. You'll cut yourself short. You won't do the job you need to do, and the savings of a couple of dollars, they don't really care about that. What they care about mostly is that you don't embarrass them whenever they recommend you. Okay, that's the number one thing they're looking for. They want to hire you, and they don't want to come back later on to the city council, the county commission, the board, and say, I made a mistake hiring them. They'd rather pay you 20% more so that they know that you're going to do a good job. Okay, so just be aware of that kind of that valuation criteria. Oral presentations and interviews, almost always with an RFP. Practice your pitch. Okay, your capability pitch is different than your capability statement. I heard Cynthia say that yesterday, but practice your pitch. Get used to being able to do that in a few minutes. Know how to do that in a way that it makes sense. Always, you're not fumbling around. I was actually on as a sub one time with this big company, and I came in and they were so unprepared for their presentation. I didn't practice with them. I should have, but we didn't. But they met for lunch right beforehand, and I got in there and I had my way of doing things, and I was like, "Oh, how did you get to this point? How are you so big and I'm not?" Because they weren't ready to go with that oral presentation. They just threw a number of people together who came into the room at the same time, and then none of us had really had a time to actually practice and present it in the right way, and we all had our own way of doing things. Just know that going into it. So be prepared, practice, and potentially even pitch in front of someone else, okay? And who can even evaluate using the same evaluation, because remember that in that pitch, that presentation, this is what they're looking for. They don't want to, all the other things are looking for staff expertise. They told you what they're looking for, okay? Read what they're asking for, because they're telling you, okay? Negotiations, here it is. So they're going to negotiate with you, okay? Almost always with an RFP, they got some room, wiggle room there, because when they get to the table, you're the expert, and they may all of a sudden say, yeah, you know what, now that you've said that, we want to do that too. And we've got a little bit of flexibility in our budget, so we're going to work with you, okay? Agreement is going to be a contract here. That's basically, they're telling you they don't have a contract, but here's the draft things that we want to work with, and we'll work with you on that. The disclaimers and so forth. Everything else at this point really kind of becomes, somewhat perfunctory, and these things, the same things you see over and over again. They're telling you how they want to submit it. Okay, 3 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, March 30th. Always look for the local time. Okay, understand what that is, because if we were in Alabama, they might be on Central time, and then they say 3 p.m. They forget to put in Central time, and you get there, you would be, I guess you'd be late if you're in Georgia, and you don't want to be late because of some silly thing like that. Because if he gets there at 3:01, they're not going to consider you. Okay, no matter how much time you put in, how bad the traffic was, they don't care. Yeah, it's 3 p.m. They told you get it there. I would get there a day before. I wouldn't get there 5 days before. I'd get there a day before, because I don't want to just laying around and mischief, and you don't know what's going to happen, who's going to see it, and so forth. I'm going to get it there the day before, okay? And most likely it's going to be timestamped of some sort, okay? Just pay attention to these things. The first time I read this, I'm writing this down in my Google sheet. I'm knowing exactly the timeline. I'm not going to let that slip. If it's something I'm really interested in, I'm going to just put this on my phone. I'm going ahead and be aware of that. Okay, that's so important. They want 20 single-sided pages. You think this is strange to having to tell you this, but you'd be surprised at how much more information they may get than they really want. And they don't want that. They want to be able to evaluate you competitively speaking to somebody else. And so therefore you need to be there and give them the same type. Double-sided pages, 10. Okay, so if you do double-sided, then you can't just go in there and do 20 and then make it 40. Okay, I mean, they're that specific. And if you do that, they've already told you right here, they're not going to consider you. So, that's not worth losing. So they want you to be concise. That's plenty of room. And so you don't need to be sending them 5 pages. Okay. There's a gauge there. Only you will know what you need to say, but they're expecting to have to read about 20 pages. Then I should be expected to give them enough information to fill that for them, that expectation. Okay. So know that going into it, and how you deliver it. This has become more different now that we have been in the COVID situation. It seems to be easing a little bit. Whether or not it's going to be electronic or it's going to be loaded up into a document system. Don't be fumbling around in the last hour to get that done. You're going to have some problems, I guarantee it. Okay. Everybody's trying to do it at the same time, and they're not going to be able to help you with that. You're not going to be able to call them and ask them. They're just going to expect you to do that. Okay. So give you some time in doing that, but read those out. Knowing that almost everywhere, everything's due to open records. Everybody else is going to read yours. In fact, if you decide you want to go to something like this in the future, you might want to go and read some that have already been submitted. They're out there somewhere. Almost always the winning proposal is out there. Okay, they're laying it out in the number of pages. They're very specific on this. You're going to read through there. Almost all of them are going to want an introduction letter. In fact, I decided yesterday I'm going to do a little session like this just on introduction letters. Okay, and how important they are, and how what you need to say in a one-page introduction letter of some sort, with a cover letter. Okay, but here they're telling you how they want it written out. Okay, and you want to do that. You don't want to skip that. They want your qualifications. They want your personnel listed, and they want your references. Here they tell you they want 3 similar assignments from other cities in the past 10 years. Sometimes it's 3 years. Sometimes it's 2. That's actually a very generous one. They're 10 years. You need to meet that as close as possible. So, for example, I've worked in 34 states. I wouldn't necessarily want to go out there and pull references from South Dakota, North Dakota if I've been in Georgia. Okay, I want to get something close, something common. Now, if I've only got one client in Georgia, and I got one client in South Carolina and one client in South Dakota, then I might want to look at cities the same size, I might want to look at, something similar in the approach. I don't need to be giving them five different references. They want three. Okay, that's all I need to give them, three. I'm gonna make sure that those individuals know that I'm recommending them, or they're gonna recommend me or whatever. And I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna give them up-to-date information. Things change, people change. You don't want them call and say, because I do a lot of stuff on subs for other companies. I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to them and say, yeah, you know me, but I was there under a different brand name, and I want you to know I'm bidding this under my brand name, and I need for you to be able to give me a reference if you could. They're always going to say yes, most likely, because they don't want them to get caught off guard in that process, especially if you're newer. Okay, because in this particular case, this is similar assignments. It could be done with another company, something. There's all kind of reasons why you may not be under your current brand name. Okay, or your current company name. So you want to be able to do that and use that. And if I didn't have other cities, I would just say I don't have three other cities, but I have 3 other clients. Here they are. Okay, and I can provide you more clients. Everybody starts somewhere. They know that. Once again, they're asking for this. This is ideal. Don't give them more. Give them as close to this as you can get. But it's don't just bypass it, because if you're the perfect person for this, don't bypass it because you don't have 3 other municipalities that you haven't worked with. Okay, that you have worked with. Make sure I say that right. Insurance. Sometimes they'll give you specific ones here. It's more generic. If they tell you they want 5 million, I had a client just the other day said that. I'm like, I'm not buying 5 million unless you hire me. I don't have it right now. Because it's going to cost me a couple $1,000, and your contract, it needs to cover that. If I get it, I've got a letter from my insurance person who says, sure, I'll insure them. It's just going to cost you this much money. Most everybody can get insurance if you're in business, but just because they ask for something doesn't mean you have to go out and get that beforehand. You just need to tell them that you're able to get that. And then some past projects. Oftentimes you can have this online. You can point to it online, have that ready to go. My capability statement. I've now started seeing them with, QR codes. I guess the Super Bowl, everybody got caught up with a QR code, where you put the QR code on your capability statement if you want to now. Drive them to the web, give them some interactive access. These things should be the basic information that you would have. You're ready to go. Give them details. Okay, but remember, in this particular case here, you're limited in the number of pages. Okay, so that's going to have to come into play with that, because most of us are going to give a 30 or 40 page a document back in terms of reports, and when we do that, that's going to drive us past this page number. Okay, so oftentimes we'll give them a summary or synopsis and say, and to see more information, actually it says here's copy or working web link to plan. This is a good RFP. I wonder if this person took my class. I really UGA, so we'll see, because they've done a good job. Proposed work plan, fee proposal, they'll land it out how they want you to do it. So lump sum cost, and then they're going to give their meeting sessions that they want to be at, how they want to interview, and so forth. Very straightforward. And then here you got the EEO requirement. You're going to have in Georgia the SAVE requirement. I think this is probably what that is. And then you're going to have the sample professional service agreement. They've given you one, so you're not going to be amended. Make sure you can live with it. Okay, it's there. That's a big part of the document at this point. And here's how they're going to pay you. Okay. And then sometimes, if you're at the federal level, you've registered yourself in SAM, the System for Award Management. That's basically the accounts payable system for the federal government. Local governments, they're not a part of that. So here they probably are setting you up in case you do win, so they can pay you, and so they might ask you for some bank information and so forth up front. Most times they just do that whenever they get you to the next stage, or when you actually sign the contract. Okay, so this is a traditional RFP. It's I think very straightforward. There's not anything there that's so unusual. And so what I'll do is I'll take you back to my slide. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'll look and see if I've got some there. But going back, and let me see here. I have this quote here. It's my favorite. I leave almost all of my sessions with the same thing. It is the only source of knowledge is experience. Okay. This Albert Einstein, you get in there, you do it, you're going to learn. Okay. You might make mistakes the first couple of times. But that's a learning experience. And just understand that you're not always going to win. One of the classes I teach has to do with, it's basically, we call it Gov School Focus, where I actually walk through an RFP that I responded to and I lost it. And I explained to you why I lost. and I learn from it. And so we just share that part of it that you'll learn as well. And pay attention to the winners. If you're not winning, the best way to find out how to win is to look at the winning proposal. Okay, and look at those over and over again, and you'll catch that. It's not difficult. Once you get to that stage, then you're winning over and over again, because the decision-making process is the same. They're telling you how to do it. It's just what you're doing is learning how to do it. And once you learn how to do it, then you're going to win contracts. Certain contracts, I can pick it up. I know really 70, 80% shot that I'm going to win this contract. All I have to do is got to respond to it the right way. And so that's there. And so with that said, let me just pull out and we just say we know every first and third Thursday, we do have an RFP writing session. Got a little bit off in February, but we'll get back to that. And this is more of how to respond and how to write and tools to help you do that. Okay. But with that said, let me see if I got any questions that you want me to answer here. Okay. So the one was an RF quote. It can change. Okay. RFQ can stand sometimes for request for qualification, request for quote. And so it could be a little bit different. Qualifications there, they go in before they even issue the RFP. They want to say, we want to know if you've got the qualifications to bid on this first. So we got to verify that. So we need, if you're a civil engineer, please give us your credentials. Have that ready to go. We're going first, and then we'll go out there, we're going to check, make sure all your credentials stand up, and then we're going to allow you to respond to the proposal. Or maybe I'm looking for a labor counsel. I want to know that you've got labor law practice. Okay, I know, and so forth. So that's why they do that. That's the request for qualification, driven almost always by the industry themselves, and they help govern that for the individuals. And because they only want to compete with people who are qualified as they are. Okay. Do we include all elements if they aren't asked for? You only include what they ask for. That's the number one rule. Okay. If you're not sure, then pose that question in their Q&A sessions. But I really wouldn't, where I just give them what they want. Okay. If whenever I get my foot in the door, then I would help them understand you also need to do this as well. I've been doing this a while. You may not have done. In fact, remember this, whenever they go to hire you, this is probably the only time they've done that. Okay. You, on the other hand, will have, after a while, you're going to have, I've worked on 350 projects. So I kind of know what these governments should be expecting and what they really are asking for. And sometimes I help them understand that when I'm in a pitch meeting and say, you know, you're asking me this question. This is really what I think you might be asking as well. And you may want to consider it. You do it in a nice way, of course, but it helps demonstrate your knowledge and capabilities. How do we capture a bid? Capturing the concept of capturing a bid is just making sure you find the one you want. Okay. And you're not wasting your time on those that you really don't have a shot pursuing. Okay. And you can do that with research. You can do that with pricing. Well, the number one way I do it though is looking at key indicators, and that's every industry is different. My indicators are number of employees, and it has to do with the number of the population and the budget size. And so that's the ones I focus on. I don't go after multi-million-dollar contracts. I'm in a range that is just between 20,000 and 75,000. If it's bigger than that, I don't really want to deal with it. I end up losing money. If it's smaller than that, it's not worthwhile. So it's kind of, these are the things that you kind of have to decide. And then you pursue those, and you'll find that you're competing against the same folks at that point almost all the time. You win some, you lose some. And remember, you're going to lose, probably you're going to lose a lot of them. And so, but remember, oftentimes they come back to number two or number three. Things don't work out with number one. So, you know, the first thing I always do, the last comment I ever make on an RFP is thank you for considering me. Okay. Let me know if I can help you in the future. And because they're going to go back out, most likely. At the end of the day, it is a smaller universe. With that said, if there's any final questions, I'll be glad to answer them. But I do thank you for coming today. We always enjoy this part of our service. If you haven't purchased our service, come to our prices area, and you can see we are the most affordable option available. Has volumes of information. Our My States, where most folks start. Regional is by far the most popular. It's up to 14 states, and our national service is the most comprehensive in the United States. We are the largest aggregator we've been doing for a while. Also, somebody said about debriefing, always attend the debriefing if it's available. At the federal level, it's more available than it is at the local government level. Local government, the debriefing is most oftentimes in the city agenda. And I didn't really talk about that, but you like in Decatur here, when you go into their website or any government, they're gonna have like their meetings, and you can go and you can actually go back, and if this RFP was issued this month, probably a month ago or 2 months ago, they talked about it in that agenda item, and you can go in, you can filter those meetings, and you can see those agendas, and you can learn more about the topic that they're involved with. Those minutes are there, they're easy enough to read, and that's a download, but it's there. And I learn more in reading agendas than I do just about anything else in our business. I do that a lot. In debriefing, so they'll usually have those available. But I would just share with you, local governments traditionally, they don't bother, they don't really send you a note to say that the note they send is we've selected another company. Okay, not necessarily like the federal government. Thank you, Cynthia. You're great as usual as well. So thank you all and have a great afternoon. And just a reminder, this is on YouTube Live. And if you want to go back and remember home, YouTube Live and recordings there. Okay, and you can pop on and you can watch this on your own leisure. Thank you.